Okay, so in the last video we left off viewing your private Dropbox folder. So what I'm showing here is a sample directory for a fictitious user 31. So the first thing you need to do is get the ancient font up and running. In order to get the ancient pictograph Hebrew up and running, you will need to do the following. In the folder titled Library New User Start Here, you will find a file titled Pt2 Hebrew. We mentioned it in a previous video. Next, you'll want to simply copy and paste this file into the folder titled Fonts in the control panel of your computer. If you have trouble locating the control panel, just ask your computer friends how to get there, or YouTube or Google should be able to help you figure it out. Then when you open after you get it copy and pasted into the fonts folder of the control panel, when you open the interactive translation project user portal file up, everything should convert automatically. If you did it wrong, I'll explain what that'll look like in a minute. Well, maybe now. Okay, so once you get that file dumped into your fonts folder in the control panel, you'll want to go ahead and go back to the file that you copy and pasted into your private Dropbox folder, the user portal file. You'll want to go ahead and open that file, and please recall from the previous video, this could potentially take anywhere from a minute to 1 hour, depending on your computer processor speed or something about your computer computing power, and or if you selected individual or combined book files from the Interactive Translation Project library. Okay, so after your user portal file has opened, you should see something similar to this. Please note that if you did everything correctly, you should see the ancient Hebrew fonts showing up in column J. So cell J11, for example, left to right. By the way, if you didn't do it right, then in column J, you're going to see just a scramble of English letters, just like ABCs all mixed up. But if you did it right, then if you look at J11, for example, from left to right, you should see a ancient Hebrew letter that kind of looks like a T or a cross. And then that'll be followed by a letter that looks like an arm with a hand on it. And then the next one over will be a letter that looks like English capital letter E laying on its side, and that letter will be followed by a letter that resembles an ox head, etc. So if you see these that I just mentioned, good job, and if not, you need to go back and make sure that you copy and pasted that file into the fonts folder. Sometimes if you're still having trouble, you might need to close the file and open it again, and it might automatically update. In the worst case scenario, what I've seen sometimes is you just need to highlight all the cells in that column, and be careful not to grab the header, but just start at row 11 and then go and grab everything below that, highlight it, and then go to your fonts pull-down menu in Excel up in the ribbon, tools ribbon above, and just make sure you have ancient Hebrew selected, and it might do it for you then. If it hasn't done it automatically, I think it should do it automatically though. Okay, so I better explain everything else you're looking at real quick, and then we'll discuss what else you need to do to get up and running. So just looking at this, this is your home page, and you can see out to the left you have your place, your like where you are, G for Genesis, chapter 1, verse 1, chapter 1, verse 2, and then the next column, column H, you have the box Hebrew text in sequence. I really wanted to try and stick with the oldest, most original scripts, the base text to be translated as I could, like pretty much what we see in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I'm under the impression that the Dead Sea Scrolls do not have vowel points. So vowel points came later, and I don't know everything that goes along with vowel points, but if there are any traditions in there or things that can potentially twist meanings of words around, I don't have a ton of experience, but if the Dead Sea Scrolls don't have vowel points, then I don't want vowel points, for example. So anyway, the next column over is I. In column I is the IT number, and you can see, so essentially what you're looking at is there is an IT number assigned to every single word in the Hebrew language. So the Hebrew reads one word at a time straight down the page, so that eliminates the problem of like reading left to right or right to left. Like we can make a comparison between Hebrew and English one row at a time just simply by looking one word at a time. And so we eliminate the left to right, right to left issue, and we just assign an IT number to every single unique word in the original text to be translated in sequential reading order. So then again, in column J, that's your ancient Hebrew text, the Pt2 Hebrew, and I just wanted to make sure I included that. I haven't fully looked into that yet, but there's a lot of interesting. There's some history behind that, and I recommend Jeff Benner's website and his YouTube channel. I think he has a playlist called the History of Hebrew or language or alphabet or something, and he goes into a pretty good explanation of ancient artifacts that kind of have these letters on them. So then the next column is the King James Version translation, and I just put that in there kind of as a reference, but it's kind of a challenge. As you can see, I've only really got verse 1 in there, and the reason for that is because the King James translators, I guess they kind of rearranged words to kind of make things make sense in English. So for example, the King James reads, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." But I guess if you look one word at a time in the Hebrew, it actually says something more like, "In the beginning created Elohim the heavens and the earth." The point is created, the verb comes before the noun, so I don't know if any of you are familiar with well, just like it kind of oh goodness, like Yoda from Star Wars. It's just a weird way of talking to us in English, but I think I want to stick with that. Like, I want to translate that in English, and I'm going to say, let's throw the English rules of grammar and stuff out the window. I want to translate the Hebrew into English and then try and make sense of it from there. So if the Hebrew word created comes before Elohim, then that's what I want to see in my translation. I don't want to see in the beginning God created. I want to see in the beginning created Elohim. And you see what I mean? So anyway, the next column L, is Jeff Benner's mechanical translation, and I think he has a website, The Mechanical Translation. You can look it up. But he was very generous in sharing his work with me. So this is kind of the point of these English translations, the King James Version and then Jeff's mechanical translation here, are just to kind of help users to get a grasp of where they're at, to to understand, just as a reference, English as a reference, to just kind of help them understand where they're at. Because, a lot of us don't read Hebrew, so if you only look at columns H and J, it's like, how do I even begin to translate? But seeing the English there allows you to kind of understand generally where you are and what is the word you're looking at, and so you can kind of go from there. So anyway, the column N is the user translation, and that is automatically generated. You don't want to input any data into that column. You, as the user, want to only enter data into the yellow cells, and we'll talk more about that later. Everything else that is not in yellow will be automatically doing things, and you don't want to mess with that. So there's the administrator's translation in the next column, and the voted translation in the next column. And if you want to understand what these are better, I recommend watching the first introduction videos in this playlist to this project, and they kind of describe what these things are. In column Q, there is another set of IT numbers that match the other IT numbers we saw out to the left. I just put them there too, so you could kind of line things up more easily. And then these next three columns kind of show you what were the ranked words or phrases that people came up with for specific IT numbers. So this is kind of just some initial data we plugged in there just to kind of test the program out. But you can see the way it works is you have the number one ranked word or phrase, and then you have the second, and then the third, and there will be another database where you can go to kind of see more rankings if you want. But you can see there is a number in parentheses followed by the phrase, so that number in parentheses tells you how many votes that word or phrase got. So you can see, for example, the vote is split on IT number 2 and 3, God and Elohim. Like, one of the users is saying, yeah, I kind of like how the King James people did it, and they put God first and then created, but then someone else is apparently saying, no, let's do it the other way. And so you can see the vote is split 1 and 1, and it'll just give you an idea of kind of how close the translation is, but the majority isn't always right, and that's why there's another translation, the user translation, so the user will have the ultimate decision of what that translation should be. And so anyway, the next the cells V through X, I'll talk about them again later, but those are where users will input their translational data, and that last column is just kind of a reference for the apply to all tool to let users know if they use that tool. So if they decide to enter an individual translation, but they already use the apply to all tool, they can kind of make sure they're in agreement with what they've previously done, or if they're going to contradict it. But okay, anyway, that was a long explanation. But I just also wanted to take a second to mention, if you look at the top of the screen, at the top of the Excel window, you should see a name or title of the Excel file you have open. This will be important to keep tabs on, as I will explain shortly. So you should see up there should reflect the name of the file you just opened. Either an individual file, individual book file, or the combined book file. In this case, I have an individual file open because I'm recording this on my slow dual core processor computer, and I did not want to mess with opening the big one. Okay, anyway, next, when you open this file, every time you open it, maybe I should have said this first, but hopefully you're not. Maybe you didn't even notice it. But when you do open your user file, After you've moved it to your private Dropbox folder, you will need to look for the security warning pictured here and click the options button. So it'll be kind of along the top of the Excel screen, just above the cells and under the tool ribbons. Should say security warning, automatic update of links has been disabled. So click on the options button. Next, it will ask you some questions. You'll want to select enable content and click OK. If another message pops up and says something about not all links can be updated, just click continue. Finally, you should go ahead and update your user number and your screen name circled in red. And this will be the screen name that other users can see. So if you want to share your name, or if you want to kind of just have a private screen name so people don't know who you are, it's up to you. Okay, so that's it for this video. In the next video, we'll talk about how to relink your personal user portal so that you can start getting a live feed from the interactive translation user inputs. So next, I would recommend you check out the video titled Getting Started with the ITP Part 3, Relinking Books from the Library. I believe it should be the next video in this playlist, but I'll try to include a link in the description below just in case you somehow found this video and you're not actually in the playlist, or you can find the playlist by going to the YouTube channel and clicking on the playlist tab.